Good morning on this first Sunday in April. Does it feel like April? Well, that was yesterday, but still feels like we're being fooled. So Reverend Kevin, Vic Allen, and I, Molly Brinkerhoff, who I am today's worship associate, bring you today's service both in person and virtually. So, welcome. What you bring, who you are, enriches us all. We say welcome to your joy, your hope, your pride. We say welcome to your grief, your fear, your anger, and the parts of you that are not yet ready to be seen and heard. Welcome to them as well. For we are a people of faith, faith in our expansive welcome, faith in our ability to grow, faith in the precious gift of our truths, faith in the promise of trying, learning, and changing, faith in our capacity to know ourselves and each other ever deeply. Welcome to you who are gay, straight, bi, pan, lesbian, queer, questioning, unable to be contained in any word. Welcome to you who are trans, cis, genderqueer, non-binary, intersex, agender, or beyond words. Welcome to you who are human. Welcome to you who love and are loved. Welcome to you who are blessed, which is all of you and all of us. May this time together be a blessing. And Cindy has an announcement.
Good morning. It is with regret at her departure and gratitude for her service that the Board of Trustees at UUCIF has accepted Elizabeth Colliotti's resignation as Director of Lifespan Religious Education. Elizabeth sent us the following statement. After discernment, I have decided not to return from leave to my position at UUCIF. I wish the congregation all the best. I hope this can be a positive transition time for all of us. During this transition time, I will not be attending services at UUCIF, but I hold you all in my heart. On behalf of the congregation, we thank her for nearly a decade of service to the UUCIF. Her energy, hard work, and attention to detail were inspiring. She will be missed in RE, but we look forward to the contributions to our congregation that her many other talents will surely provide. And thank you to Elizabeth. Now, for the good news is that Marty Carson, Reverend Kevin's wife, has agreed, graciously offered to become the interim religious ed person while we go through this phase. And I hope you all of you with kiddos, get to know Marty a little better and come to enjoy the things she has planned for children and youth here at UUCIF. Thank you.
So, yes, well, we wish the best for Elizabeth. So, I have other announcements. We have quite a few. Please silence your phones. And I'm one of the worst, so I've got mine silenced. I think I do anyway. I got to make sure. Okay. Yep. If you are watching us virtually, if you are able, please sign in on the chat box to the right of your screen. This will let us know who is joining us. We will be having joys, sorrows, and concerns today. So those of you in the sanctuary, if you have a joy, sorrow, or concern, Rosie has some little pieces of paper if you want to run over there and get one and fill that out, and we will be sharing that later. If you're on virtually, please put your joys, sorrows, and concerns in the chat box. Next Sunday is the second Sunday shared meal after church, so please come and bring a food item to share. Also, next Sunday is the Change for Change Sunday, and all cash donations and checks earmarked for Change in the basket will go to Meals on Wheels. Next Friday is the next women's group, and we will be meeting at Catherine Giovanna's, who's right over there, at 5:30 at her house. If you need her address, talk to her or myself. If you are able, please respond by April 6th to either Catherine or me so that the hostess can kind of plan on how many people will be at their home. And our Unitarian Universalist women's group is for all people who identify as female or non-binary, or anything in between there. And last, it's good news for Anita, but a little sad news for us. Anita Carpenter is moving to Phoenix, Arizona on April 22nd to be closer to her daughter. There will be a going away party on Sunday, April 16th at the Olive Garden at 2 p.m. And Layla Chambers is heading that up, and if you would please let her know whether you can attend, that will help her make some plans. If you need her email or phone number, again, talk to me. So we will now move into our sacred time of worship. So settle yourself, relax, and take several deep breaths as I ring the bowl, the peace bowl, 3 times. Now we'll begin our service with our prayer. What's that? Our covenant, along with our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles, is our guide to how our congregation will relate to each other and the world. As I read our church covenant to us all, please recite it with me. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will now be lighting our chalice. If you at home have a candle or chalice available, please light yours with us. Living with Pride by, the words that I'm going to read are Living with Pride by Lori, I need my glasses for this one, Halaban. We light our chalice flame for those who live their lives in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague which still takes far too many, too young, too soon. So many gone, so many never lived to see, our gay kids singing on TV, our gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. We light our chalice flame for all of these and for all our siblings of the rainbow, surviving, living life out in the open with pride.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Spring by Mary Oliver. Somewhere, a black bear has just risen from sleep and is staring down the mountain all night in the brisk and shallow restlessness of early spring. I think of her, her 4 black fists flicking the gravel, her tongue like a red fire touching the grass, the cold water. There is only one question: how to love this world. I think of her rising like a black and leafy ledge to sharpen her claws against the silence of the trees. Whatever else my life is, with its poems and its music and its glass cities, it is also this dazzling darkness coming down the mountain, breathing and tasting. All day I think of her, her white teeth, her wordlessness, her perfect love. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Thank you. Good morning. The book I am reading today is titled Love Makes a Family by Sophie Beer. Love is baking a special cake. Love is knowing where everything is. She found the baseball. Love is finding the biggest puddles. Love is lending a helping hand. Love is watching from the front row. Love is playing on the weekend. Love is making things better again. Love is washing away the day after the biggest puddles. Love is reading one more book. Love is chasing away the monsters. And love is a kiss before bed. Good night. Now we're going to sing out the children. We're going to take them up. We're going to sing out the kids. We're going to take them upstairs.
Spirit of life, I give thanks for the opportunities to love that present themselves in the turmoil of life, where the light catches the eyes in another's tears, where hands are held and there are moments without words. Let us be present then, and alive to the possibility of changing. Let us seek to make another's well-being the object of our concern. Let us seek to be present to another's pain, to bathe another's wounds, hear another's sadness, celebrate another's success, and allow the other's story to change our own. This is a very special time in our congregation where each of us has the opportunity to share major events in our lives, our joys, our concerns, and our sorrows, so that we can all be uplifted by our UU community. So I'm going to start with myself. I'd like to light a candle for my son, William, his wife Nicole, and their baby Zoe. They are right now in the process of moving from Brooklyn, New York to Boise, Idaho, and they're in Central America somewhere. I mean, United States. But I heard that there was a baby meltdown, and then a dog meltdown, and then a cat meltdown, and then I'm sure mom and dad melted down too. But they're on their way, so. Oh. Make sure. All right. From Pam, we have a joy. Welcome, Laura and family. We're so excited to see you. From Victoria, a joy. Finally seeing robins on open ground. Yeah. Hope they're finding worms. From Judy Stanley, has a sorrow. When people are sad about their friends dying, be kind to their friends and family. And do we have anything? From Anita Carpenter, She says she continues to improve, still get tired really easily, have mixed feelings, is excited to go to Arizona, but sad to be leaving everyone here. So, and any more? So we will light one more candle for all those joys and concerns we are not yet able to share.
Instead of our usual reading this morning, I'm going to share a video, and it's from a sermon given by Reverend Gail Geisenhainer in the 2006 UUA General Assembly. And we're going to watch about the first 14 and a half minutes where she tells her story of her first introduction to Unitarian Universalism. This story was reprinted as an article in the 2012 UU World, so some of you may be familiar with it, but I can't hear it or read it enough. I think it's a fantastic story. So just as another note, Reverend Gail Geisenhainer is currently the Minister Emerita of First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she served congregations in Canoga Park, California, and Vero Beach, Florida, before becoming senior minister in Ann Arbor in 2008. So enjoy the video.
I was forthrightly evangelized into Unitarian Universalism. I was 38 years old, living in Maine, driving a snowplow for a living and feeling very sorry for myself, when a friend invited me to his church. He said it was different. I rudely refused. Truth be told, I cursed his church. All blanking churches are the same, I informed him. They say they're open, but they don't want queer folk. To heck with you and your church. But my friend persisted. He knew his church was different. He told me his church cared about people, embraced diverse families, worked to make a better world. He assured me I could come and not have to hide any element of who I was. So I went. Oh, Mama, I went all right. And I dressed so carefully for my first Sunday visit. I spiked my short hair straight up into the air. I dug out my heaviest, oldest work boots, the ones with the chainsaw cut in the toe that exposed the steel. I got out my torn blue jeans and my leather jacket with all the fringe. There would not be one shred of ambiguity this Sunday. Those people would embrace me in my full Amazon glory. Or they could fry ice. On my way in, I carefully arranged my outfit so that it would highlight the rock-hard chip I carried on my shoulder. And I bundled up every shred of pain and hurt and betrayal that I had harbored and nurtured and carried with me from every other religious experience in my life. And I lumbered into that tiny meeting house on the coast of Maine. Blue jeans and boots, leather jacket, spiked hair, and belligerent attitude. I accepted my friend's invitation. And I went to his church. Now, I expected the little gray-haired ladies in the foyer to step back in fear. That would, in fact, have been familiar at that point in my life. Instead, those ladies stepped forward as I entered. They offered me a bulletin and a newsletter, and they invited me to stay for coffee. It was so odd. They never even flinched. They called me dear. But they pronounced it dia. Stay for coffee, dia. I stayed for coffee. I stayed for Unitarian Universalism. Yeah. Over time, the good folks of that congregation loved up the scattered parts of me and guided me from shattered to whole, from outcast to beloved among many. And those folks listened to me. I and my life partner became their poster children for the brand new Welcoming Congregation program. But that's fair, because those folks went on to provide important local pastoral and legislative ministries to gay folks in Down East Maine. We walked together and we helped each other to grow. Please, do not think that the transition on either part was smooth or swift. These were not imaginary superheroes. These were human beings, and this was the mid-1980s. During the worship service on my second or third Sunday there, a woman stood during Joys and Concerns to announce that all homosexuals had AIDS, all homosexuals were deviants who could not be trusted with children, public health, or civil society. All homosexuals should be quarantined, packed off to work camps to provide useful labor for society and keep their filthy lifestyle and deadly diseases to themselves. As that member spoke, I slowly sat upright from my customary slouch. I tucked in my arms. I looked furtively around to see who might be glaring in my direction. And I tried to remember if I had parked my car facing in or facing out in the parking lot. It's true. In its journey of covenant, this congregation had just stumbled onto an important crossroad. But as Joys and Concerns unfolded, not one person made reference to the call to quarantine homosexuals. The pulpit that morning was ably filled by a student from the local seminary. At the end of the sharing, the seminarian made a brief comment to ensure thus that not all of these sentiments that we had heard this morning represented the whole congregation, and That was it. We were done. Now, I was at a crossroad. Surely I left that week immediately after the service. But what about next Sunday? Would I go back? Why on earth would I go back? Going back would be, well, you fill in the word. Going back would be dangerous, stupid, foolhardy, looking for trouble, probably hurtful. But I went back. I was in the throes of learning my first lessons of being in covenant with religious community. When we covenant to walk together through all that life brings, it means when things get ugly, we do not walk away. Mercy, how we yearn to walk away. That's okay. But our covenants call us to abide and to work things through together. The next week, the regular minister was back. The service began as usual, and I did tense up when it came time for joys and concerns. Someone announced something like a birthday I certainly don't remember, but I vividly remember, as one by one, folks in that congregation rose to speak. Folks who never talk in front of more than two people. Folks whose voices we had never heard. One by one stood up and some awkwardly, some forthrightly announced that not everything we heard last week was either right or true or representative of who we were as a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Thank you. The crossroad had been engaged, not by the minister or the board or a formal presentation. The crossroad had been engaged by the folks. The direction the congregation would take was being chosen. This congregation would not be stuck in conflict, mired in name-calling, or diverted from its gentle, steady trek toward the beloved community. Our aspirations were unfolding, one voice at a time. That congregation had reached a crossroad where one among them had begun the use of language that would depersonalize or endanger others. She tried to create a class of less than human persons toward whom violence would be acceptable. The congregation gently refused to follow. And then something to me even more extraordinary and wonderful began to unfold. I frankly had never seen it anywhere before. That congregation refused to depersonalize, refused to dehumanize the original speaker. Yeah. They stayed in what Martin Buber calls the I-thou relationship. They did not start calling her names. That homophobe, that gay basher, none of that happened. While the speaker tried to turn homosexuals into objects to be manipulated, the congregation never referred to the speaker in a way that was less than embracing and respectful of her full humanity. Later, in that same church, I opened the hymnal to find the words attributed to the Buddha. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. The Buddha taught, let us overcome violence by gentleness. Only through love can hatred come to an end. Never, never does hatred cease by hating in return. My friend was right. His church was different. He did forget to tell us, however, that his church on some Sundays, I could be in for a wild, wild ride. But he was right. His church really cared about making things right for everybody. Now, over time, attending general assemblies and district meetings and working with various groups at the church.
It's available on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. It goes on quite a ways. And it's a great example of a General Assembly worship service where you have about 2,000 UUs in attendance in this case it's in the Fort Worth arena, and if you're going to experience what a UU megachurch would feel like, that's about your only option right there. So it's a wonderful story, and like I said, I can't hear it too many times. An offering to support the mission of this church will now be given and gratefully received. When I first began taking classes in seminary 16 years ago, I started out part-time at Hartford Seminary, and later I entered their cooperative Master of Divinity program with Andover Newton Theological School, from which I graduated. Hartford Seminary is rather unique because it hosts the Center for the Study of Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations and the Hartford Institute of Religion Research, which focuses on the sociology of religion. This allows Hartford to offer some unique classes you won't find at a typical seminary. One such class, which was one of my first classes in 2007, was titled Varieties of Gay and Lesbian Religious Life in the United States. It was taught by Dr. Scott Thumma, a sociologist of religion whose PhD research was on the topic of gay religion in the 1990s. What I found most fascinating and enlightening in the class was learning about the broad variety of religious life in the LGBT community. ranging from subgroups within almost every major religious movement to distinctive LGBT religious expressions such as leather bar evangelical Christian groups and neo-pagans whose spirituality was centered on a strong sense of LGBT identity. We may think that LGBT folks would be naturally inclined to denominations like Unitarian Universalism or the handful of liberal Christian churches that openly affirm LGBT equality. But the truth is, like everyone else, their spirituality is diverse and is only one facet of who they are. For my final paper in that class, I decided to look at how accepting and supportive Unitarian Universalism was of LGBT folks in 2007 after so many years of trying. And my paper was titled, "Are We There Yet?" A look at bisexual, gay, lesbian, and transgender acceptance within Unitarian Universalism. A lot has changed in the 16 years since I wrote that paper. And given the atrocious political climate in many so-called red states these days, I thought it would be a good time to reflect on the same question once again and extend the question to what is going on in American society. Are we there yet on LGBTQ plus acceptance, or have we started to slip backwards in some ways? Is the rainbow of inclusion starting to fade? And if so, what are we going to do about it? A quick note on language before I continue. During this sermon, I've chosen to mostly use the abbreviation LGBT and sometimes the expression queer folks as shorthand for the broad spectrum of gender identities and sexual preferences that exist, referring to basically anything but heterosexual or cisgender. Specifically, LGBT refers to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks. But other people identify as queer, genderqueer, agender, intersex, non-binary, and several other names that continue to evolve with our understanding of just how fluid the spectrum of gender really is. It is not my intention to minimize anyone by limiting my language. I just find it tedious to say something like LGBTQIA+ repeatedly, and you would probably find it annoying as well. In the research for my paper, I dug through all the historical records and data I could find, and I also decided to send out a short survey to an online LGBT community within Unitarian Universalism to gauge their contemporary opinions on the subject. After analyzing the data and survey results, what I discovered, not surprisingly, is that we really do have a lot to be proud of on LGBT issues as a denomination, but there are some darker moments as well. It would be impossible for me to talk about all the history and findings I discussed in my research paper this morning, but here are a few highlights. Prior to 1969, there was little discussion of LGBT rights in our movement, and there was a lack of awareness on LGBT issues among Unitarian Universalists in general. At that time in America, people knew that gays and lesbians were living among us, but there was an implicit don't ask, don't tell attitude in society, even among liberal UUs. The Stonewall Uprising in New York's Greenwich Village in June 1969 was a watershed moment that raised awareness about gay rights in America. That same summer, Reverend James L. Stoll became the first UU minister to openly come out as gay. Stoll was a Star King graduate who had served as a parish minister in San Francisco from 1962 to 1969, and by all typical measures, it was a successful ministry. In early 1969, Stoll was forced to resign his pulpit under suspicions of misconduct, including being discovered to be gay. The UU Department of Ministry wasn't sure what to do with Stoll, and many of his colleagues called for his removal from fellowship. He was allowed to remain in fellowship, but Stoll never again served as a parish minister. He instead focused his work on advocacy for LGBT rights and acceptance within the UU movement. If the way Stoll was treated seems shocking to us today, consider that in a 1967 survey of UU congregations on the issue of homosexuality, 7.7% of Unitarian Universalists believe that homosexuality should be discouraged by law. 80.2% believed that it should be discouraged by education, not law. 12% believe that it should not be discouraged by law or education, and only 0.1% believed it should be encouraged. The average UU may have been further along the road to acceptance, but not that much ahead of most Americans. Clearly, attitudes have changed significantly in the last half-century. The first statement of conscience on LGBT rights was passed by the Annual General Assembly in 1970. The three actions called for in the 1970 resolution were: 1, an end to all discrimination against homosexuals, homosexuality, bisexuals, and bisexuality, including private consensual behavior between persons over the age of consent. 2, an end to all discrimination against homosexuals within the UUA with respect to employment and practices. And 3, a call for initiating education programs aimed at greater acceptance and ending discrimination within all churches and fellowships within the UUA. In 1973, a UUA Office of Gay Affairs was approved by the General Assembly. It became operational in 1975, and it has existed ever since through several name changes. The AIDS epidemic in the 1980s increased public awareness of LGBT issues, but it also fueled the bigotry of a number of groups who saw it as a, quote, gay disease. It was still very difficult for gay and lesbian clergy to be called to serve in parish ministry, and it was essentially impossible for bisexual and transgender ministers. One gay minister I know, who had his first experience with a UU congregation in 1984, told me at that time there was still significant homophobia and discrimination within the movement, such as congregations open about not accepting LGBT ministers. On the other hand, as you heard about from Reverend Gail Geisenheiner's positive experience from the 1980s, and other anecdotal evidence that suggests a similar evolution of attitudes, we know that things did begin to change in the 1980s. Even though Unitarian Universalists sometimes exhibited the same prejudices that were seen in the larger society, and unfortunately still do on occasion, we were clearly growing in the direction of affirming the dignity and rights of queer folks. We are among what you might call early adopters of LGBT rights as a moral issue for people of faith. In 1990, the UUA published the first edition of the Welcoming Congregation Handbook. It is a resource to assist congregations with becoming more affirming of LGBT folks and to implement the association's Welcoming Congregation program. Many congregations embraced the program and soon became certified. But after the initial burst of interest, the number of certified welcoming congregations added each year dropped off steadily. By the end of the decade, approximately 25% of all UU congregations were certified, and by the summer of 2006, that number had reached roughly 50%. The number has continued to grow year over year, and most congregations have now become certified welcoming congregations, like ours. And even those who haven't become formally recognized are generally very welcoming. Increased activism and public witness on LGBT issues was the hallmark of our movement in the 1990s. In 1992 and again in 1997, the UUA expressed disapproval of the Boy Scouts of America's policy of discrimination against gay and atheist scout leaders. In 1993, delegates of the UUA General Assembly in Charlotte, North Carolina, participated in a public witness against the state's so-called crime against nature laws, and they passed a resolution protesting the ban of openly lesbian, gay, and bisexual persons in the military. The same year, thousands of Unitarian Universalists joined the march in Washington for lesbian, gay, and bisexual equal rights and liberation. And the number of LGBT clergy in the UUA has slowly increased each decade. And these days, it is common to see gay and lesbian clergy called as settled parish ministers. The number of ordained bisexual and transgender ministers is much smaller, especially those who identify as transgender, and churches seem more reluctant to call them. I've heard accounts of transgender ministers actively serving congregations that confirm there is less tolerance than you see for gay and lesbian ministers, although there has been some progress. In 2016, a new support group for transgender religious professionals met for a retreat, and 27 trans leaders attended. I don't have more recent statistics, but I suspect it is probably about the same number these days. As usual, the slow acceptance of trans people in our denomination reflects a similar trend in American society in general. We still have work to do internally on transgender acceptance. UU ministers have been performing same-sex civil unions and marriages since at least the 1970s. And UUs have been strong allies in the fight for marriage equality. When the Supreme Court ruled in favor of national marriage equality on June 26, 2015, in the case of Obergefell versus Hodges, there was a spontaneous celebration at the UUA General Assembly, which happened to be in session. The very next day, many UU ministers volunteered their services at courthouses across the country to conduct free wedding ceremonies for any couple who could finally obtain a legal marriage license. Having seen years of pushback against legalizing marriage equality, even in liberal Rhode Island, where I lived for 16 years, mostly originating from the Catholic Church, I am grateful to have witnessed the historic event of marriage equality becoming the national law. It also happened to be on my birthday. Back in 2015, despite the immediate threats to repeal it, I couldn't imagine America going backward on the issue. But in light of recent appointments to the Supreme Court and rulings that have already chipped away at hard-fought rights, especially about reproductive choice, I am no longer so confident. Justice Clarence Thomas has already hinted that the court should revisit the 2015 Obergefell ruling, and social conservatives are actively trying to get a case before the Supreme Court to test the waters. Even though a reversal on marriage equality that would, quote, leave it to the states would create legal havoc across the country, I don't think most of the current justices really care. With their ruling on access to abortion, they appear to have either approved of the chaos that followed or didn't care. And many state legislatures can't wait to restrict or nullify same-sex marriages if federal legal ambiguity allows. I was shocked to discover that the marriage statutes in Idaho still define who may get married as follows: any unmarried male of the age of 18 years or older, and any unmarried female of the age of 18 years or older and not otherwise disqualified are capable of consenting to and consummating marriage. For now, at least, You can get a marriage license in the state of Idaho as a same-sex couple, but the language of the statute has not been changed to reflect this reality. It seems to be lurking there in the code, waiting for a return to heteronormativity. I have no doubt that Idaho and several other states would immediately move against marriage equality given the chance, just as they did on abortion rights. Once our now indicted former president came into power after the 2016 election, his hateful rhetoric encouraged all sorts of bigotry to crawl out of the shadows. And those who harbor irrational and ignorant prejudices against the LGBT community seem to be especially emboldened. Never mind climate change or school shootings, the important issues that they feel demand action in so many state legislatures are drag queen story hours, and using the bathroom of your choice, and banning transgender athletes. Things are very bad right now. Just this past Friday, in honor of Transgender Day of Visibility, I received an email from Dr. Elias Ortega, the president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, which described the situation plainly. He wrote, "It is a wicked and evil state of affairs in which we find ourselves now. Politicians aiming to maximize their political gain by feeding the imaginations of their constituencies with prejudice, inflaming the fires of hate with fear, have launched a frontal and ferocious attack on trans lives and those who love them. We are witnessing an unprecedented weaponizing of our political and legal system across several states. 592 bills targeting LGBTQ plus people, 299 of which specifically target transgender people, each one based on the premise of withholding the dignity and denying the sacred worth of trans lives, particularly children and youth, and extending threats of punishment to those who care for, love deeply, and hold trans members of our community as sacred." Turn on the news or check your Facebook feed on almost any day, and you will likely see some news story about anti-LGBT legislation, politicians spewing their hatred, or even violence directed against LGBT people. The symbolic rainbow of affirming the sacred worth of all our siblings seems to be fading some days. But I'm reminded that a real rainbow is a phenomenon of light. And if it begins to fade, the light need only intensify to restore its brilliance. I think this is also true of the symbolic rainbow of the fight for LGBT equality. We who support this movement need to intensify our light in the days ahead and drive out the darkness and bigotry in America wherever it persists. The rainbow needs to shine brighter than ever. It can be disheartening to realize we have to litigate and march in the streets for issues that should have been put to bed decades ago. Voting rights, a woman's right to choose, and real equality for our LGBT friends, family, and neighbors, perhaps even marriage equality. In legal terms, such rights should have been treated as stare decisis, settled law based on legal precedent. But an activist Supreme Court stacked with right-wing leaning justices has changed that. And their allies in state legislatures and political groups around the country are furthering their cause. We ultimately need Congress to enact legislation to defend these rights. But the political realities right now do not make this very likely. If we are to remain true to our principles and values as Unitarian Universalists, we must continue to place ourselves at the vanguard of this struggle until someday when our ideals can become a reality and America becomes an even more perfect union. But we must acknowledge that this will be difficult and even dangerous at times. As Dr. Ortega went on to say in his message, ours is the task of rising above the fray to recognize the risk that we may run by going down the path of arguing for instead of resisting from our commitments. Our liberal faith has a long history of transforming ourselves and helping to change society for the better. In a little over 60 years, we have evolved our faith into a very welcoming and affirming spiritual home, though we still have some work to do. America, too, has made progress, even if we seem to be sliding backwards these days. It is my hope that we are merely witnessing the last gasp of dying anti-LGBT bigotry in the face of inevitable change. There is evidence that this is the case, especially when you compare data on the attitudes of youth and young adults to older generations. For now, let us keep fighting the good fight, no matter our sexual orientation or gender identity, always widening the circle of inclusion and love. I invite you now to join in singing our closing hymn, number 168, One More Step. Our closing words is a prayer in honor of International Transgender Day of Visibility, which was Friday, by Dr. Elias Ortega in his message that I quoted earlier. Boundless and all-embracing spirit of life and love, we gather here united in our quest for a deeper understanding, connection with each other, and the sacredness of every being on this earth. We call upon the wisdom of the ancient sages and the strength of our ancestors who fought their battles with grace and dignity as we honor and recognize the inherent value of our transgender siblings. We join in the celebration of the diversity of our embodiments and experiences, and do so affirming that we are worthy, that our dignity is ours to claim, and no one can withhold that from us. Divine light and gracious protector, we lift up and honor the lives of our transgender siblings whose journeys embody courage, resilience, and self-determination. May our hearts be open to the beauty and strengths in their stories, and may we recognize the divine spark within them so that we may recognize it clearer within ourselves. As our ancestors did before us, we ask for guidance in our pursuit of collective liberation, to remind ourselves that we are interdependent and our destinies are entwined. We are called to bear witness to the struggles of our transgender siblings, to honor their sacredness, and to protect them from harm. Strengthen our resolve and enliven our imaginations, so that we may live up to the task of creating a world in which we can all thrive without fear, where we can express our authentic selves, and where we are treated with love, dignity, and respect today and tomorrow. May our labors of healing of the wounds inflicted upon our transgender siblings be a salve for our generations and those to come.
Please join me as we extinguish this flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And then please join us downstairs for refreshments after the postlude.